A very good evening to all of you joining us here today, and a warm welcome on behalf of the Bangalore International Center and the Bangalore Literature Festival. It's a special evening for us at the Bangalore Lit Fest, a privilege to have two people who've been part of the festival at different times over our past 8 editions to date and have enriched the festival. So, a very warm welcome to you, Ram Guha and Sharda Ugra. I said special because we are doing this as a hybrid event, both in person and live stream. So, to the audience that's gathered here at BIC, an extra special welcome. And of course, most importantly, to both Sharda Ugra and Ram Guha for agreeing to be here in person. This is special also because for us, this is a pre event ahead of the ninth edition of the festival that's taking place next month. That'll also be hybrid with the sessions taking place in person. We're being both bold, brave, and cautious. I remember when we had invited Ram Guha to participate at the festival last year, he had declined saying his new book was going to be out this year and he'd definitely be there. We would have loved to have you in person at the festival, Ram, but we think of this as the important board president's 11 match ahead of any cricket series in India. With that, I'll hand it over to Sharda Ugra to take forward what promises to be an exciting conversation about Ram Guha's new book, The Commonwealth of Cricket.
Everyone can hear me. All of you here in the Bangalore International Center, thank you for being here. This socially distanced, small but very dedicated audience, as well as I'm told 100, maybe more than 100 people who are watching online. Today, we're going to have a conversation here with Ramachandra Guha, who all of you know, who the book tells me is professor, but he says he's not. We get to that. We get to that story as well. It's a great story. It somehow involves Mansur Ali Khan Patodi. So Ram's new book is called The Commonwealth of Cricket. It is about all of you should, I think, buy it if you can, because at a time like this is the kind of book all of us should read. It's a mix of nostalgia. It's about being a cricket fan from the crazy 70s all the way till now, and there's IPL and there is this entire transformation is taking place in Indian cricket. And Ram's book tells us what it's like to be a player, a watcher, and a scholar in a sense about it as well. Before I get to asking him about the book, there's a section in it. I've read Ram's books on cricket, and I've read spin and other terms. I was like so relieved. I thought, thank God someone's written about our players in this way. Because all the time we read stories about Fred Truman and about Dave Gower and whatever, and there was nothing written about Gavaskar and the great spinners and Ajit Wadekar and the victory of 1971. And then spin and other terms came back and sort of landed in our laps. So thank you, Ram, formally in front of everyone and the online audience as well in these bizarre times. And Ram mentions in the Commonwealth of Cricket that he started writing spin and other terms, which he wrote in 2 weeks.
Yeah, draft in 2 weeks. It's a slim book.
He wrote, someone in the audience showing us exactly, it's a slim book, but it's a weighty book. It doesn't weigh much, but it carries weight. He wrote spin and other terms after the demolition of Babri Masjid, and he was depressed, and he said, listen, this is almost like a process of catharsis. What about Commonwealth of Cricket? Did it come about in the times that we are, or were you always writing it? Or tell us something about how the whole thing started.
So it was more a release than a catharsis. I always knew that I wanted to write about my boyhood in Dehradun and the roots of my old passion stroke obsession with the game, which a minor historical correction began in the 60s, but I excuse you because you don't know the 60s. You're too young for that. And I wanted to write about my uncle Dore, my maternal uncle Dore, who in many ways this book has many heroes, but my uncle Dore is probably the most important of them. And I wanted to write about him and the kind of influence he had on me, and how that shaped my attitude to playing, watching, discussing, debating, and all of that. Right. Now, but I didn't know when I would write about it. And I wasn't sure it would take the shape of a book or a long portrait of him, a long essay. Now, two things happened. One, in 2017, through a peculiar combination of circumstances, this fan was in the cricket board, tasked with helping to administer it or mal-administer it, as the case might be. And then I started keeping a diary about those weeks in the board. Then I left the board. I became a fan again. Memories of Dehradun, St. Stephen's College came back. There was also a meeting in Calcutta before I started writing this book with my old college captain, Arun Lal, who had recovered from cancer, and I had seen him after his battle with cancer. And then I just, meanwhile, I had finished my biography of Gandhi, which is 1,000 pages long, and with lots and lots of footnotes, and an index also extending to dozens of pages. So I needed a kind of release from scholarly writing. And I was in Kunur, our home in Kunur, before the pandemic, which was pretty and relaxed, and it just came out. I mean, of course, fortunately, nothing as awful as the demolition of the Babri Masjid that happened before the writing of this book. And I hope nothing as awful happens after the writing of this book either. But it was, in many ways, a book that was germinating within me for a very long time. And after I had finished this major scholarly commitment, which was a 2-volume biography of Gandhi, writing on cricket was a release. And writing without footnotes, as you point out, the book does not have footnotes, does not have an index, was just kind of joyous. And then it just flowed. All the memories came back, because apart from the 2 chapters in the BCCI, the rest is all from my mind, which is why there's some memories that are misremembered. I mean, there are a few errors in this book, which early readers have already pointed out to. For example, Raj Singh Dugapur, I think, the chief selector, and I call him the manager at a particular point in the book. But it just came out like that. Many things, yeah. But so it just came out as a kind of release and an escape from scholarly writing.
Ram has mentioned the fact that he's written 2 chapters towards the end of the book about his participation in the Committee of Administrators in BCCI, and that has been the part that has made the most news over the last week, 10 days, I think, in the papers. And I was very tempted to begin with it, and like the true journalist, not very that we start asking the question, but I would hold myself back and keep it right till the end, because this is literally the latter 2 chapters of the book. One of the most interesting sort of bits when I looked at first one, the cover is beautiful. So tell me about the cover. Who chose the picture? It's a lovely photograph of kids, boys playing cricket. I should actually ask someone to just hand over their copy of me so I can hold it out to the audience. So it lacks of me not carrying. I don't know whether this can be shown or so it's a group of about 7 boys padded up. One of them is running across. What's the story of this photograph?
No, it's. I must thank my publisher, HarperCollins, who found it. I mean, the photograph. I mean, they had done a disastrous cover to begin with, and which was truly, very, garish. It had all kinds of colors. I mean, red and crimson and purple and so on. And it said nothing at all. And I said, this won't do. We need a photograph. And then I think it was originally taken by a Hindustan Times photographer. And it's perfect, because it's kind of got a Swami and Friends kind of look. It's kind of an R.K. Narayanish cover. And there's only one thing wrong with the cover. I mean, we just hold it up again and show it to people. Sorry.
Yeah, no, my copy has the cover. I've kept it.
It's a beautiful picture, but there's only one thing wrong from my point of view. There are only batsmen and there are no bowlers, because this book is, among other things, a tribute to bowlers. But it's a gorgeous photograph. And Sujata, my wife, who's here, who's as you know, a designer, she saw it at once, she approved it, and the lettering also went. There were 2 photographs that were quite interesting, absolutely perfect for the book.
It's an absolutely beautiful photograph.
Now, also, by the way, this is, I don't know who the boys are. I think they must be Bombay. Look at it. But these 3 friends have written to me saying, is the 3rd boy on the left you? Now, I have not reached level of self-importance to put myself on the cover of my own book. I mean, even a boy photograph. So I don't know who it is. It's a lovely, lovely photograph taken, I think, in Bombay.
I've not been able to keep the cover of this book because I'm very particular. It's got a lovely white cover, so I've kept the cover at home, and therefore I couldn't hold up. My copy's just got the sort of black safe so I've kept the cover. It's a beautiful photograph, and when you look at it, you are reminded of what it was like to be a young player, I was a very bad. I was just telling Sujata, I was a very, very average player. I will not even. But of course, I remember my highest score. I remember my best performance, which of zero importance in the world. Anyhow, so the subtitle of this is a lifelong love affair with the most subtle and sophisticated game known to humankind. Why did the subtitle have to be this long?
So the subtitle is a nod to 19th century subtitles,
Okay.
which are often that long. An inquiry into wealth and poverty in the remote regions of sub-Saharan Africa between 1888 and 1921.
Like a PhD thesis.
Or even a 19th century book, a travelogue. I mean, it's actually a nod to a cricket book which I referred to in a corner of Foreign Field, which was by a British writer, Cecil Headlam, and it goes something like this. An account of a cricket tour through 10,000 miles of India and Burma in the year of the coronation Darbar. Now that's the main title. I didn't want a main title that long. So the subtitle I thought would have this. And the first part is completely accurate. A lifelong love affair. The second part of the subtitle, the most subtle and sophisticated game everyone in this room thinks is accurate, but not many other people. Not maybe my son, who's a fan of Arsenal, or my daughter, who's a basketball player herself,
or anyone who likes chess,
or likes chess.
Game,
it's a game, yeah, likes chess, and maybe golfers. So I wanted to just tease and finger lovers of other sports who may have had something to quarrel about. Yeah.
I think that worked in that sense. They'll be just cribbing and saying another cricket book has come to surpass our sport is being suppressed by cricket, and now here is another book. But there are times when I write on other sports as well. And whenever anyone asks after long, so I have this great passion for this, that, football, Indian football, some athlete in a remote part of the country, and they say, what is your favorite sport? And I say cricket. And everyone's so disappointed. But that's true. It's almost like it's an addiction that you can't get out of. It just stays. One of the interesting parts in the book, which again, and I read the book not in sequence, I read it random chapters. Of course, I started with the last two first because they were the most.
Not the last two. 9 and 10.
9 and 10. Yeah. 9 and 10. Not the last one. Right. 9 and 10. Yeah. Not varieties of cricketing chauvinism, which is also an important chapter in that sense. What I want. So I've lost track. So I'll go back to the original question I had, that you, from being a absolute lover of cricket, then you went into your little Marxist sort of phase and then came back to cricket. At going through cricket administration, those two chapters that are there, and being part of the BCCI and seeing things and which were not very beautiful, how do you then retain your love for cricket? How do you then come back to that love? Is it by abandoning the chauvinisms that you may have had?
So so the chauvinism was already I was getting out of. I think there's the epigraph, as you would have noticed, is from Jack Fingleton, where he says, the older I get, the less nationalistic I become. So I had already outgrown the chauvinism, and I could return to watching any kind of cricket. And I think it's also because for me, the aesthetics matter a great deal. That's why the most subtle and sophisticated. I mean, why is cricket so much more subtle and sophisticated than baseball? I mean, let's not go into cricket versus soccer, because that might be apples and oranges, than baseball. Because baseball is only, the diamond is only 90 degrees, not 360 or 100 and something degrees, not 360 degrees. Because in baseball, the bowler can only do things in the air, whereas in cricket, a bowler can do things in the air and off the wicket. Because in baseball, the condition of the pitch does not matter, or cloud cover does not matter. Because in baseball, the batter can't hit behind, can't do a reverse sweep or a Dilshan scoop. So if you look at the diversity of options open to a bowler, a batsman, and also it's even. The best cricket matches, but Test cricket is even, right? Like you saw yesterday when Zampa, leg spinner, got Indians out, right? It's even. In baseball, if you have a good pitcher, the good pitcher is unbeatable on a given day, and batters can't do anything. Even fielding in baseball, my American friends marvel about fielding. But if you fielded, if you stood at first tip in Dehradun on January 1st at 9:30 and a catch comes your way without mitts, right, of a fast bowler, like forget it. So, so in that sense, the aesthetics appeal so much to me. And that's something which I hope some readers of the book get. For example, when I describe uh, an on-drive that Hari Gidwani played in 1974, which is still imprinted in my mind because I watched it, or a catch that Azharuddin took in the bitter freezing cold in Manchester in 1999. So a great feat of athleticism, of artistry, of technique is poetic, to watch, particularly if you're there. On TV, you can't really get the same thing. And in that sense, that's what you like. I mean, that's what you like so much. I mean, wicket keeping. I mean, in many ways, if you go back to spin and other turns, you mentioned my writing about Gavaskar, great spinner. But if you ask me which is your favorite chapter, it's about Kirmani, an engineer, because they're the most underappreciated people. And to see Kirmani keep to wicket keeping. Now, let me tell a Kirmani story. Okay. Now, which is since we are in a Bangalore audience, I should tell a Bangalore story, and not about Dravid, and not about Kumble, and not about Vishwanath, and not even about Chandrasekhar, but about the great underappreciated Syed Mustafa Hussain Kirmani, who I truly I'm fond of, even though he did not give me a test match ticket, which I talk about in the book. I talk about how Kirmani would not give me a compliment.
Over and over again. Yeah?
Over and over again. Yeah. Okay. But let me tell you a Kirmani story. Okay. Now, this was Kirmani retired in 1993. I think from Test Cricket Award. Then he played his last Test match. In 2001, I was watching a match in the Chinnaswamy Stadium. England was playing India in a one-day match. Srinath bowled to, I think, maybe Mike Gatting. I forget who was not Mike Gatting. Maybe Nasser Hussain was Mike Gatting would have retired by then. There was a leg side catch with Kiran More missed. Next to me in the stand was, just a middle-aged man sitting alone. He looked at More, dropped that catch, and he said, Kirmani would never have dropped that. From a million miles away, he was berating More. And then he stood up and said, bring him back even today and he will catch that. Now, the first part of the statement was true. The second part, who knows, right? But if anyone has seen Kirmani, if keep on a turning track to Chandrasekhar, that wicket keeping is something that's such a neglected art. And that's why watching, as you would agree, watching Saha keep on Indian tracks. Other people may glory more in Rishabh Pant's hoik over mid-wicket for 6, but not for me. It's Saha's leg side stumping any day. So if you have that kind of sense about cricket, then winning and losing and records don't matter. And however old you are, you can appreciate the art and the technique of the cricket.
And it has separated, it has taken away nationality, it has taken away everything else that is there, even the state of the match at that point Absolutely. In time. Yeah. One of the astonishing things in the book, which is full of fantastic stories. I mean, if I start recounting the stories, we won't stop, because, and literally those stories cover from 60s, I think older stories also from
what my uncle has told me, my father has told me.
Yeah, ancient stories. I mean, I remember one of the earlier stories I was told when I was growing up, that C.K. Naidu once hit a century, only got 100 only hitting boundaries. Those sort of folklore that you hear. What is astonishing in the book is, along with the story, is your memory for detail of events that have taken place. Now, as a journalist, I need to keep notes, or I just blank out. There are very, very few things I'll remember as instinctively as you seem to remember in this book. Did you ever take notes, or it was just in your head, or you just have a fantastic memory?
No, it was in my head because I've lived cricket for so long. There must have been a few, there probably still are one or two errors, which I talked about. Fortunately, some things I could correct. There was a match which I talk about, which is the first match under floodlights in the Wankhede Stadium, right? And where Tendulkar got a brilliant 90 and then was stumped. Mark Waugh bowled a white ball and was stumped, right? So I described that innings.
That I remember because that I watched.
That you watched, okay. And there's a chapter on Tendulkar. And I was writing this and I was discussing this on the phone with someone. And my friend said, I think you're wrong. India won that match. But luckily I had Cricket Archive, Wikipedia tell me now. But I wrote spin in other turns. Maybe I made a mistake, right? So a few things I did check like that. But by and large, I just wrote it from the top of my head. And I had to obviously check some dates. I mean, there's another mistake which my son Keshava, who's read it in draft, corrected, which was the month of, I think it was the Princess Diana charity match in Lords, which I mentioned again in the Tendulkar chapter, because when that match was taking place, Michael Atherton was giving commentary, and I heard him say, the way Tendulkar is batting, you may have to rename the WG Grace Gates outside Lords, right? And I said that was the winter of something. I gave some wrong date, and that was corrected. So luckily, a few of those things, Google Mama was saved me
No,
from.
I'm saying
But
things
by and
like
large,
Hari Gidwani's drive, those things that you
but
get.
even Atherton saying this, or Fred Truman saying something was just there in my head. It was just there.
Or the great Keith Miller quotes that are there in it about the Indians. I was trying to see, now I can't remember it. I'll have to open the book and find it.
Yeah.
All the Keith Miller stories.
Sure. Those are, I didn't have the book with me. I read it when I was a boy, about cricket crossfire, about Bradman and Mushtaq Ali and Merchant. Absolutely.
The other story about, so Ram is talking about abandoning chauvinism, and that's something that happens even when you're a cricket journalist. You start out fundamentally a fan, which all your editors will say you should not be a fan, but if you were not, you would not be in journalism, in sports journalism anyway. You can't get into it in any, like I keep saying, you don't have to be a fan of oil and natural gas to get the oil and natural gas beat, but you have to be a cricket fan to become a sports reporter. So they say don't be a fan, and you kind of abandon your fandom after some time. It kind of wears away, and then you don't pretty much care whether your country wins or loses. But there's one team that you are extremely still very chauvinistic about, whose tie you are wearing. I think you should tell the audience about the tie and about it's a very big part of the book. It's a chapter, and you keep coming back to
right to the book. So this is my club, the Friends Union Cricket Club, Bangalore, right? Run by my uncle Dore, who is, as I said, the hero of this book. But it started long before my uncle Dore. It's the second oldest club in Bangalore, the oldest being the Bangalore United Cricket Club, the club of Dravid and Kirmani, Roger Binney, and some other Karnataka and India greats. And I joined FUCC when I was 8. So I grew up in Dehradun, as the book describes. But I would come to Bangalore for my summer holidays because my grandparents lived here. And after they moved to Bangalore, my Mama Dore moved with them. So my first memories of Bangalore are the summer of 1966. Malleshwaram High School ground, where we used to practice, and where I would go with my uncle at the back of his scooter and take out the mat. I wouldn't take it out, he and his colleagues would. I would watch while they put the mat, and very different from what cricket is like today. Hammered in the nails, and then they would practice. And I was there, an 8-year-old, and there was a wonderful man, a member of the club called V. Ramdas, who played one first-class match for Karnataka, the match in which Vishwanath scored 230. Ramdas's elder brother, V. Subramanya, was a test player and a long-time Mysore captain. And Rami saw this little cricket mad boy coming every day with the captain Dore. So he marked out a wicket at 12 yards from me. So you bowl from there. So at the age of 8, I started bowling. Just as they say in Hindi, kachi mechi, mazak, and they would indulge me. And that club has been with me and inside me ever since then. It's a deep emotional bond. I watch them play several times a year. After the pandemic ends, I'll be watching them. I've seen dozens, indeed hundreds of little boys graduate from 5th division to 3rd division to 1st division to state junior team to state team. Regrettably, if my uncle has one regret, which I share, he's never produced a test cricketer. He's produced many Ranji Trophy cricketers, but he's produced very fine, upstanding human beings. The FUCC is the most upright club in Bangalore in how it's run. Its finances, its ethics, it's abiding by the spirit and the letter of the game. Dravid himself, in his Sardesai Memorial Lecture, without knowing that Dore was my uncle, praised my uncle Dore for what he stands for. So and I have, this is the only tie I own. And I talk in the book about whether I'm, about a a formal dinner at All Souls College in Oxford, where I wore this tie, and the misrecognition that happened when
fantastic,
when an Israeli opposite me thought I was a member of some old Oxford college. Because really what happened was, it's a very kind of British story. The warden of All Souls College, the economist John Vickers, was sitting in between me and a distinguished professor who had just joined Oxford from Israel. But the warden turned out to be cricket mad, so he had only interest in me. So the Israeli thought, ye to bada aadmi hoga. I have joined Oxford yesterday, right? This guy must be some vendor. So he kept on looking at my tie. And he said, through the dinner. And the warden was ignoring him and talking to me. And
cricket, obviously. Talking cricket.
Talking obviously. And then after dinner, we got off and went off to the, to say goodbyes. The Israeli professor looked at my tie, picked it like this. and said, "That's Magdalen, isn't it? Magdalen being the oldest and the most venerable of Oxford colleges." And how was I to tell him it's not a tie of a 13th century Oxford college, but the tie of a cricket club in central Bangalore? Now, so that's the kind of sentimental attachment I have to my club. And it's my primary attachment, always, always, yeah.
And in the story, Ram just sort of nodded in a sophisticated manner and walked off. So he obviously still thinks whoever the professor
That's
is
right.
that.
No, by the way, yeah, sure. I did that, yeah. No, yeah. So, no, I didn't want to say it. So, and I've also wanted the MCC and other places. It may be, it's the first time I've worn it in the BIC, probably the last time, because I very rarely wear ties, right? But it's this affiliation to a club. Again, it's a time that has gone in cricket. Now it's IPL teams. But in the old days, if you were growing up in Calcutta, I don't know anyone here ever grew up in Calcutta? Okay, so you remember Rajasthan, Sporting Union, Mohan Bagan, East Bengal, which were not just football clubs, also cricketing clubs. Dilip Doshi played for
Ram,
Rajasthan.
let me
for example.
interrupt you here. East Bengal and Mohan Bagan are playing in a 2020 tournament these days.
Okay, good. So, Dilip Doshi, for example, played for Rajasthan, not for one of the great clubs. Arun Lal played for Mohan Bagan. And sporting loyalties in Bombay, it was Shivaji Park Gymkhana, Dadar Union. In Madras, it was Alwarpet Cricket Club, Jolly Rovers. That's the in Hyderabad, it was Secunderabad Cricket Club and Maredpalli Cricket Club. So that's how people develop their loyalties to their local club. That's how they started playing. So for me, this is a primary loyalty. Karnataka next. And India, for me, was only tertiary. Didn't really matter. I mean, I don't tell the story in this book, or maybe I do. I once wrote a column in the Hindu where I said, I don't care if India wins or loses, so long as Dravid scores runs and Kumble takes wickets. And again, like the subtitle, I wanted to tease the jingoistic cricket fan into what about you don't care if India loses, but I don't tell you. Yeah.
And coming to the jingoistic cricket fan, we're going to be segueing all the time, so you will excuse us. You can at some point we'll allow you to ask questions. This whole thing of jingoism in Indian cricket, the way I look at it is sort of the 1996 World Cup to me is that big shift that happened. The match in the Bangalore match, the quarterfinal, and Javed Mirdad's retirement. Is that how you see it, or did you? Because you went to a lot more games. Do you feel it changing? Do you sense change in the crowd and in just the way Indians?
I think the 90s were particularly bad because the 90s were bookended by the insurgency in Kashmir and the Kargil war. So they were particularly bad. And of course, religious conflict within India, economic insecurity, opening out the economy, what that might mean, the Mandal conflict. So the 90s were particularly bad. I think it may have declined a bit, partly because India wins more often, but also possibly, and I hate to say anything positive about the IPL, but maybe because you have foreign players playing here all the time, it's heightened the appreciation of the ordinary fan for players from other countries.
So you're speaking of a reflection of society, Indian society, on the way cricket is seen and watched and responded to, and you say in your book that scholars tend not to pay attention to that. Do you think you're the scholar that changed that people now, when they're talking about India and society and looking at social change, cultural change, that cricket is a part of it as well? It had always been, but in terms of there being an academic interest in it?
No, I think that it would be unfair and pompous and conceited for me to claim credit. I think the first scholar
when did you bring it in?
But the first scholar who changed it was who brought sociology and history into cricket was the Australian Richard Cashman, who wrote a wonderful forgotten book called Patrons, Players and the Crowd. Richard Cashman, it's a very interesting story, which I should say a little detail. Richard Cashman was an Australian historian who came to do a PhD on Indian history and wrote a book on Bal Gangadhar Tilak. His PhD was on the Lokmanya. He was a political historian, but he was a club cricketer back home in Sydney. So he came to do his research in the city you know so well, Bombay, because Tilak, Pune and Bombay was so important. While he was in Bombay, he got fascinated by the Bombay Maidan, started following cricket, of course, he completed his PhD, but he kind of lost interest in Tilak. And now he's a great historian of Australian cricket. I mean, he's written many books on Australian cricket, but along the way, he produced his book, Patrons, who funds the game, players, what background they come from. So he has an appendix of the 130 test players who had played for India till that year, 1978, where they were born, what their religion was, caste if known, class background. It's a brilliant sociological appendix. Patrons, players, and the crowd. You know how the crowd behaves. So that's a very important book. It's a landmark in a sense.
Yeah, and the players, patrons, and the crowd. The thing is that I remember I met him in Australia 2013, and we were just talking about why could that book not be reproduced again, or at least brought out to a newer audience. I think Orient Longman were the publishers.
Correct.
But
what did he say?
He's dying to have it out. He said,
We should have it out, yeah.
will there people be interested? I said, of course people will be interested,
Of course,
because it's again, he was just astonished at the change that had taken place.
I think I'll work on it. We talked to Orient Longman, but you should write a forward to it.
Okay.
Okay. I'll talk to Orient Longman and you write a forward to it.
Because I remember, done. I
Good.
remember.
It's a great book. It's a great book.
It's a great book. I remember seeing it first. And when you saw it as a cricket fan, we bought as many books as we could get about cricket. Then Indian cricket, it was great. We didn't understand it all because it was an academic book. It's this is the 80s. You are just entering college or you're studying for your boards, and nothing of it, but it was fine. But you kept it, and I don't know where you can get that book now if anyone wants to buy it.
So I'm sure I'm sure I can persuade Orient Longman, which is now Orient Black Swan, to reprint it with an introduction by you.
Okay.
And then we'll come back again to BIC in a post-pandemic time and discuss Cashman's book.
Yes. Another thing which is very strange, which as a diehard fan, and I almost feel insecure when I see it, that you have dreams about cricket. You must tell people about the dreams that you have about cricket. I have no dreams about cricket.
Well, I don't anymore.
Yeah.
But I talk about that also. I talk
openly. That's why I'm being bold enough to discuss it in the audience.
Yeah. So I used to have dreams about cricket. And the three, I don't know how long you want me to go on for, but about my dreams, it's that there were two generic dreams.
Any psychologists in the crowd? Anyone with a
There were two generic cricket dreams I had. One was I'm padded up to bat. And, you're padded up into bat. You're sitting in the, what we used to call the pavilion. Maybe now you call it the dugout. I don't know. But, and you're watching and a wicket falls, you're next. And you go into bat. And when you go into bat, you gather your gloves and of course, we didn't have a helmet in those days, but your abdominal guards, and you make sure your buckles are fine, and you go in. Now, in this dream, I'm padding up to bat. I'm waiting. The match is on. A wicket falls. I get up, stride out, and I get up. And I get up.
The dream is over.
And I wake up. So I was a bowler, and I batted number 10 or number 11. And my fantasy was to score 100. Because it's only the batsmen who get the man of match awards, headlines, sponsorships, etc. Just think of how much Kohli gets versus what Bumrah gets, and you get a sense of why bowlers are the subalterns of the game and the batsmen the pampered, privileged, upper caste Brahmins. Right. And I never got a chance. I was actually a bad batsman, but that was my fantasy, to make it as a batsman. That was one dream. The other dream, which is maybe less interesting, was about getting Neville Cardless's autobiography, which is a very rare classic of cricket literature, the first edition, and it's about going into a used bookshop and finding it, picking it up and being woken up and not being denied that prize. So I was always denied the prize. I could not get Neville Cardless's autobiography, and more importantly, I never got a chance to bat. And I think those are dreams of they're the dreams of an unfulfilled batsman. And of course, a lover of cricket literature. But I would have them repeatedly over and over again in my 20s, in my teens, in my 20s. And by the time I was in my 30s, I stopped having
the story of the batsmen and the bowlers is also true. I'm also a big fan of bowlers. Every time everyone asks, okay, what rules should be changed? Is as many bouncers as you want in an over.
And no 4 over limit in T20 and no 10 over limit in 50-50.
Whatever you want to bowl. So a lot of Indian cricketers, if you speak to them, the bowlers particularly, they say we are exactly like said. They say we are the labor class. Said we are the labor class, and what happens when India loses? Some bowler gets dropped. Which is if so all of you here, please do follow the pattern that will happen if India doesn't do well. I hope they do well. If they don't do well in Australia, bowlers are going to get dropped always, regardless of what goes on. One of the other things you said, you're praising talking about the IPL. Now you did say that in the distinction between baseball and cricket, that you have this 360, and now because of 2020, you are able to see batsmen play all the strokes, including the new, all the new ones, the dill scoop and the reverse hit and the what I call the fadeaway slog sweep and all those kind of things. Is your aversion to 2020 or is your aversion to franchise cricket? What is your, because in the book, the description is test cricket is single malt, one day cricket is almost Indian made foreign liquor, IMFL, and 2020 is hooch. So by which you just get up drunk in the morning, you don't remember anything. So what is your aversion to, is it 2020 or is it?
No, again, aesthetics are part of why I love this sport and why I dislike some aspects of this sport. I mean, how can one warm to a sport where one franchise was owned by Malia, another by the Ambanis, and the whole thing was started by Lalit Modi? I mean, chodo. I mean, it's not for me. It's not for me to begin with. I mean, apart from the fact that 2020 is extremely limited in the kind of options it offers. It's artificial because the boundaries are 50 yards. Anyone
handkerchief size, I call it.
Handkerchief size. So in that sense, but you're right. I mean, I also talk in the book about how I don't mind watching international one-day cricket, right? But yeah, the kind of sheer vulgarity of the IPL also doesn't. It's not for me. Yeah.
I don't think.
Though as we were discussing before we came on, a mutual friend, Amit Verma, is trying to persuade me that in the last 10 or 15 years, the 2020 game has evolved enough to make it distinct from cricket as badminton is from tennis. So the skills a batsman needs are somewhat different to succeed in 2020, or a bowler needs, and particularly a captain. I mean, in a test match, if it's a seaming track, you'll have James Anderson on all day. If it's a crumbling trap, Kumble give him the ball and say, get the side out, right? But in a 2020 match, captaincy is an incredibly interesting art because every over, a new batsman,
every ball
almost, right, depending on the condition of the match. So I'm getting persuaded that I'm sort of, then I said, when this friend said, look, it's a different game, you must watch it. So I said, but the commentary is dreadful. They're screaming and shouting and there's tamasha and I can't listen to cricket, on mute. Then he said, no, there's now a new channel called the Dugout, where you have the good best commentators, right? Now,
I'm so glad you said that and you have heard that, because I said, nobody knows that I wrote a piece for the Night Watchman, which is about this, watching IPL as a viewer and enjoying it because of Dugout.
Please send it to me and I might be persuaded to watch one IPL match
because of Dugout.
Okay.
Despite, all the other, because, Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi is such a iconic figure for all of us across ages, I must tell you, the last time I actually met him and I had a conversation with him was I was going into an IPL match in the Delhi Devil and he was leaving. So, of course, we didn't know how to address him. We didn't know what to say when you passed him or met him or spoke to him. You always called him Sir, because you couldn't call him Tiger. You couldn't call him Mr. Pataudi. So it was a strange. So I said, Sir, you're leaving. He said, this is about as much as I can take. And it was half an hour into the game, So that was the last time I met him.
I'm happy to be with Mr. Pataudi on this.
The thing about the sort of transformation of cricket and what Amit Verma is telling you is indeed true, because it is, I have another friend sitting here who absolutely despises it. And again, I'm trying to convince her that, listen, it's a different sport, that it is another sport. You have to look at it as something else. It is not the Calcutta 2001 test match kind of a sport. It's something else, and that's how it has to be looked at. And it's the other.
So I'll give you an answer to that. So I a comeback, as they say, or I'll push back, as they say nowadays. So I'm discussing with my son Keshava, to whom the book is dedicated and whom is also a cricket nut. And I said, this is what Amit is telling me. Maybe you and I should watch IPL. He said, Appa, I'll watch Test cricket. If I want to watch another sport, I'll watch Federer versus Nadal instead. Right? No. So I think that's my comeback. I'll watch tennis or soccer, right? So why IPL? Why debased cricket or even slightly different cricket, right?
When you were in the BCCI, just sort of cutting to the point where since you're talking about ghastly things, let's go straight into that. When you had got into the BCCI, did you sense in the discussion or the chatter of how the IPL had overtaken everything else, or was your work not related to it, so you didn't hear too much about it?
No, as I again mentioned that chapter, the committee of administrators was,
Please do tell the Vinu Mankad story.
yeah, so it was in, no, Vinu Mankad, I'll come to in a minute, but in January of 2017, last week, IPL was supposed to start in April. I had already written 2 or 3 deranged attacks on the IPL. So the administrators of the board were worried कि ये आया है, क्या करेगा? But I knew it is a cash cow and everyone wants to watch it. So, and the franchises were nervous. So my first act as in the committee of administrators, as the writer on that committee, was to draft a statement saying everything is fine, the IPL will take place. All right. And I, of course, held up my nose and for the next 3 months did not attend an IPL match, which my mothers did, which is fine. Now, the sadness of the IPL, in which Sharda has urged me to relate here, is that in 2017, the IPL coincided with the birth centenary of Vinu Mankad, India's greatest ever all-rounder, in my view, India's greatest ever cricketer. You know, greater than Kohli and Dhoni and Tendulkar and Kapil Dev, the first professional, the first Indian cricketer to hold his own against Australians and English people and West Indians. And it was the centenary of his birth. And a Bombay journalist, Makarand Vaikankar, told me this. I had forgotten. I raised it in our committee meeting. I said, have a match dedicated to him. Call this the Vinu Mankad match. It can be whatever, Rajasthan versus Bombay on that day. At least that day, honor his memory. But they were too scared of hurting the egos of the franchisees. So that is just terrible. I mean, not to honor Vinu Mankad.
To be honest, I think Ram also, the franchises would not have minded. You know, honestly,
Maybe
if
not,
you think
maybe
about
not.
it,
Yeah.
because if you're looking at it now, Rajasthan Royals were wearing what we called a Jelusil looking uniform of pink and blue or something. I've forgotten. Anyway, it was very pink. But they had an advertisement there for sanitary napkins because they're saying, okay, it's this is what it is, and let's all talk about it, and it's fine and everything. So I don't think
You're right.
the franchisees would have minded.
I think you're right. They may have taken it up. Yeah.
They would have said, okay, fine, it's one match. You know, they
Yeah.
wear green clothes.
Yeah.
RCB wears green
Yeah.
clothes on World Environment Day or something like that. There is nothing wrong in honoring a former cricketer.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of
And it turns out he's from Gujarat too.
the whole idea of honoring a cricketer almost to administrators seems like a daft thing. You know, I mean, it seems like an absolutely reprehensible thing. We can't do it. You know?
Look, ordering a long dead cricketer, kowtowing and doing chamchagiri to an existing captain of Indian team is fine, but ordering a great former test cricketer is not fine.
Why don't you? There's another story in it which you can say it or you cannot say it. Is about Ram said, okay, I'm a chauvinist about Friends Union, Karnataka in that order, and he wanted the India's test players from Karnataka to be recognized by a former test player himself. He said, listen, why can't we have a plaque or some memorial, not a memorial, like a plaque or a recognition of all the test cricketers from Karnataka?
Yeah.
And the response he got from that gentleman was, but then everyone will ask. Other people will also ask.
I'll name the people involved. This is our home ground, the Chinnaswamy Stadium, where some of you will certainly have watched matches. And I'll forgive you even if you went for an IPL match because it's the Chinnaswamy Stadium.
I've been for 2.
Okay, all right. And I was sitting watching a Ranji Trophy match, and Brijesh Patel, who was the long-serving secretary, happened to be near me. And of course, I'd watched him bat and field, and he was a magnificent batsman and a fielder. And he was now here as the secretary. And I said, Mr. Patel, Bombay, the Wankhede Stadium in Bombay, has stands named after Merchant, I think Mankad, Tendulkar, Gavaskar, and Umrigar, maybe Subhash Gupte, I don't know, quite a few. Yeah. I said, let's do something similar here. Let's have one stand, which is the G.R. Vishwanath stand, and one stand, which is the Prasanna and Chandrasekhar stand. And Kumble and Dravid can come later. Well, let's start with these.
They won't mind.
I said, they won't mind. And he said, oh, everyone will ask. I said, Mr. Patel, you played with Vishwanath, Prasanna and Chandrasekhar in the Ranji Trophy team that won the championship for Karnataka first time. But he wasn't willing to share credit with them because some of his glow will go. And that's typical of that's the reason the BCCI also would not honor Vinu Mankad, which is really very sad. I mean, and I'm glad that Bombay has done this, and I'm sure
Delhi has done this. Delhi has named the gate after Anjum Chopra.
Great,
a
great,
gate,
great,
with her photograph and everything.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic. And
Where
they also
where-
have Bedi and
And
Amarnath.
I think they have,
and Sehwag.
but it was just done very recently.
Fantastic,
very
fantastic,
recently.
fantastic,
So the
fantastic,
gate, the gate where the players drive in, where the buses come in, that's where.
No,
Anjum
I
Gupta's
would
gate is.
say that Bangalore should have at the moment one for Vishwanath, one for Prasanna and Chandrasekhar together, one for Shanta Rangaswamy, and maybe one for Kirmani, and the other guys can wait.
They'll think the stadium will collapse. It'll just break down if they do that. The entire, it'll be reduced to rubble. One of the loveliest lines in this book, which almost we also kind of, we feel that way, even though we didn't play even of any level, in which Ram says, I played with boys who played for Delhi, who played with the men who played for India.
Yeah.
So just tell us, I'm getting goosebumps even reading this out. Just sort of share this with everyone here, what that feeling was about, other than the great St. Stephen stories.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I played for the best, what was then the best college team in India, St. Stephen's College in Delhi. Two of the people I played with, Arun Lal and Kirti Azad, went on to be capped for India. Others played Ranji Trophy. Rajendra Amanath, son of the Lala, was my classmate. We played 3 years together. He played, I think, 40 or 50 Ranji matches. Someone who was 2 years junior to me, with whom I played 3 years, was Deepak Sharma, who scored 199 in the Ranji Trophy final. Our wicketkeeper was Piyush Pandey, who some of you know as a ad guru from Bombay, but was a Ranji Trophy player for Rajasthan and a first-rate batsman. Not such a good wicketkeeper. He dropped a few catches of me, but we can let that be. So the first-class team, really professional quality cricket, practice every day for 3 hours, starting in July, going on till March. 40 one-day matches, and then the inter-college tournament, ending with a final over 5 days, usually played against Hindu College, watched by 15,000 people with live commentary over AIR. That's what college cricket was like in those days. And of course, I knew I'll only play for the college. I'm not going to go beyond that. But Arun Lal knew that he would play for, at least for Delhi. And in my first year, Arun Lal played his first Ranji Trophy match when B.S. Chandrasekhar got him out. And I had divided loyalties because I went to the ground and I wanted Karnataka to win, but I wanted my captain to get runs, which he didn't. But he knew he'd play for Delhi. Piyush Pandey knew he'd play for Hyderabad. So they had higher ambitions. One or two, for Rajasthan, I beg your pardon. One or two of them thought maybe they'll even play for India. So, and they would bring back stories. So Bedi was the captain of the Delhi team. So Arun Lal, Praveen Oberoi, another Ranji Trophy player from my college, Rajeshwar Watts, a third Delhi player whom I played with, would go to practice in the Kotla and come back carrying stories from Bedi. And those stories, which I'm not going to relate to you, are maybe the best stories in the book, because it is a 16-year-old hearing about the greatest spinner of the time and what he was telling Arun Lal and others about Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd, Gordon Greenidge, Dennis Amick, and so on. So hence, that chapter is called Eavesdropping on Greatness, because I'm a boy playing with older boys who played with men who played with the gods. I mean, that's kind of from me to Garfield Sobers was 3 steps. 3 very long steps. 3 very, very long steps. Like that character in Hindu mythology who takes those 3 steps. Very, very long steps. Which I could never take, but still it was only 3 steps.
The other very lovely aspect of this, which almost in a way is replicated through this ghastly cricket tournament you do not wish to refer to, but I have warmed a little bit, not much, little, is the sort of, when you're talking about internationalism in the book, there are stories about Clary Grimmett having dinner with Vijay Hazare. And the other one, which is a beautiful, I mean, I don't know whether should be, of course you can.
Please.
This is the 1984, England and Sri Lanka are playing, Sri Lanka is playing a test match for the first time in Lords, and Mohsin Khan has called up every time there's a break and Siddharth Vettamani is batting, he calls up and has this conversation with him to tell him, okay, this is how you're going to handle it. And Vettamani went on to score a double century.
He scored 187.
Close to
Mohsin has scored a double 100. He scored 187.
So this kind of sort of internationalism that there was in cricket, in what we were discussing yesterday with some of my friends, is maybe the Alan Border sort of 1989 Ashes turned it into this absolute hostility from your opponents kind of a thing. Has the IPL brought it back in that sense?
A little bit. I mean, again, I was reading a nice profile of Kuldeep Yadav, where he talks about his admiration for Wasim Akram. Kuldeep Yadav, who's about that high and about that round, and a lovely Chinaman bowler, tells you in this profile that when he was a little boy, the coach asked him, what do you want to become? He said, Wasim Akram. Okay. Obviously, the coach said, "Tu kahan se marega, tu spin bowler man." And he became a good spin bowler. But then he went to see Bakram, who was coaching his IPL team. And so it's like, it's a lovely story. So I think that kind of internationalism, the
And
IPL may
Asian
have,
solidarity in that
yeah.
sense, Asian solidarity
But
is very tight.
I think Sharda, even at the height of jingoism, at the 1990s, the players were never jingoistic. The wonderful story, which you will remember, of, I think it was a match in Sharjah. It was a tournament in 1997 when Tendulkar got 100 in the semi-final against Australia and 100 in the final against Australia. And at the
The
end
Desert Storm innings, as everyone
and
remembers.
at
it.
the end of the
98.
final, after his second 100, one of the defeated bowlers, Shane, the great Shane Warne, went to Tendulkar and said, "Sign this T-shirt for me." So the players always had it. The players had it. The players never had. They always had profound respect for each other. But the fans had, were essentially.
But is it generated by us, by the media? Is it generated in that way? Television, papers, reporting, or the whole Australian thing of "we will beat you 5-0. I shouldn't take it all out on Australians, but okay.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it was the Australians. The Australians were pretty offensive. I mean, there's no question about that. They were offensive, and they deserve some of it. I mean, it's that's for sure. Yeah.
So this is the other sort of stories. Now we can come back to the really ghastly parts. I'm sure people will ask a lot of questions about your time growing up and telling stories in those days. My one question which I had written it down somewhere, and I said I have to ask you is, how do we, as in people like us who have covered cricket for now 30 years, you're seeing epic levels of ghastliness taking place in the board, and people are not paying attention to issues that they should be looking at. How do we still retain our love for cricket? Do we pretend that as a journalist that we don't bother about all the other stuff, or how do we deal with it? How do we cope?
I can't answer it on behalf. I may be lucky because I'm not. I'm not inside the press box. I'm not covering the board, so I'm at a distance. I was in the board for a very brief period, and I exited, and I've kind of retained it. And you can still, as I said, the art, the technique, the dramatic intensity about the ebb and flow
The
of a
skill
match.
levels of
The whole that will still appeal to you surely, and will be reflected in your writing. And you may have to be brutally honest about the way you write on the board. I mean, it's comparable to, what in politics. I mean, you can still marvel at the Indian experiment, but not be not be part of the Godi media who was praising, the government of the day all the time. And where I think the journalists, cricket journalists, have to maintain a certain detachment, objectivity when they cover not just the board, but even the players. I mean, if Kohli makes a mistake as a captain, the journalist is too scared to say that because they'll be thrown out of the press box, so Kohli will never talk to them again, or they will not get a commentary contract. But it can be an honest, non-polemical assessment of Kohli's failures as a captain. I mean, he has virtually no failures as a batsman, though he played a bad shot yesterday. That's so rare, right? But as a leader, he does. I mean, as a leader, he does, because, and certainly in the shorter forms of the game, there are things he needs to learn, maybe even from his teammates who may understand captaincy in the shorter form better than him. So to say this becomes heresy is, I think, problematic.
And what has happened also with a lot of journalists, for example, this has changed over the last couple of days, maybe 24 hours, is that previously you would have a press conference at the end of the game, you ask your questions, so on and so forth, you get silence, nobody says, you don't get to ask the question, but at least you're there. In the COVID era, at one point you were being asked to send them the questions, and then if it was approved, you'd be allowed to ask. So we had a journalist friend, a younger friend, who kept sending things like, okay, I'm sending you a question. Where is the Taj Mahal located? So he sort of went into these endless sort of nonsense questions, almost like he's doing KBC, low-level KBC questioning, because this had happened. But it has become about access. And I think professionalism has led to the fact that you don't know if you'll have stories like you have in your book, whether you'll find those kind of stories again. Because what are we going to hear from other cricketers if they are not willing to tell you those tales?
No, I think that is one impediment to the circulation and retelling of stories. The other, of course, is technology has changed. I mean, I grew up in an age when there was no television. Right. So many of the stories are actually again about technique and achievement. I mean, it's my uncle telling me of how, now there's a account in this book. So you mentioned Vinu Mankad. My uncle Dore, the hero of this book, was a left arm spinner. His hero was Vinu Mankad, another left arm spinner. In 1952, India won its first test match in Chepauk. And Mankad got 12 wickets, 8 in the first innings. My uncle grew up in Dehradun. He either heard them on the radio, he was 16, or his cousin in Madras was at Chepauk and told him. But he remembered each wicket. So he heard it in 1952 at second hand or third hand, radio or through a cousin. 20 years later, when I was growing up, he told me, you know how Mankad got Tom Graveney out? He flighted one, they dragged him a little more, he was stumped. You know how he got so-and-so out? He bowled him some turning balls, then an arbor, and the chap was LBW right there, on his back foot. Now, that kind of stuff. On television and with YouTube, it's all replayed, right? The Tendulkar's Desert Storm, every stroke of that is available. So when you didn't have live television, when you only had the radio and often no access to the radio, the way it stoked your imagination, your sensibilities, was very different. For example, I don't apologize for telling so many stories about Karnataka, right? Because that's part of my upbringing. But a story about Karnataka cricket that changed Indian and world cricket was when Chandrasekhar got 6 wickets in a single afternoon in the Oval and we beat England for the first time. Now, I was then in boarding school and I was in the 9th standard, and only those in the senior most 11th standard were allowed in the common room to hear the radio. So I'm sitting in our common study. Chandra got those wickets between about 7 and 8:30 Indian time, between for. I was sitting there and 20 yards away was the common room.
Who is the comment? Oh, you could hear.
I could only senior boys were allowed. Yeah. And the house captain, at drinks break, told me Chandra's got 3 wickets. He got so and so out. He said that at tea interval he told me he's got 6 now. And those 6 wickets, what they mean to me, right? Of course, luckily those have been captured on film. But the imagination of Chandra from my hometown with a withered arm, confusing these Englishmen, these unbeatable Englishmen with his googlies at top spinners. Because in those days, it was these stories, when stories are told without authentic, live, visual documentation, they have a greater charm. They may be less truthful, but they're more appealing.
Never let facts get in the way of a good story.
No.
The radio thing that you're talking about is something that I remember because I remember hearing the 1981 Ashes victory over radio. Yeah. And then the whole legend that grew around it. And in Bombay/Mumbai, where you grew up, you have cricket stories as well. Vasu Paranjpe stories are there. The Dilip Sardesai stories are there. So you have those stories. And now you're thinking that beyond a level of, say, literally club cricket or first class cricket, you'll never get these stories because this wall has come up amongst, writers or whoever, and the players and the team or whatever that is, which was not there even very recently, say maybe 10 odd years ago, 10, 12 years ago, it was fine. You still had that. But because of IPL, you've got all these things. But let's hope that there are ways that you can tell all these stories again.
Yeah, I think, absolutely. I think it would be a great shame if all this folklore goes out of the game, because it's not just in cricket. The stories, the musical stories, the folklore in music about MS and MLV and Ravi Shankar and Vilayat. That's so you also learn to love music more because of the personalities and what these stories tell you about them.
And so now let's get to the question, because you've told the Brijesh Patel story here. You had this interview, which is just, it is like a carpet bombing interview that Ram gave to my friend Clayton Morzello at midday about administration and so on. It's all, and this is what we are hearing more and more. I spoke to someone else recently in Delhi, said cricketers should not be administrators, they're really bad. And they're using Ganguly as the example in this case. What do you think? Is that a sweeping statement?
It is a sweeping statement. I think Ganguly has been a great disappointment as president of the board. He's kind of capitulated to the real power brokers who are N. Srinivasan and Amit Shah, who are running the board. It's totally gross and indecent and unethical for him to be endorsing fantasy games while being president of the board. But I think Srinath did a good job as when he was secretary of the KSCA. I think Bedi did a decent job in the different roles he's had. He's not a very good committee man because he fights with everyone, but he has the interest of players at heart always. So I think it varies. I mean, one would have to think about uh, other places. The Cricket Australia, the MCC has had cricketers. How good? So it's hard to say. It's like
Or is it the Indian situation is so peculiar that
yeah,
there's
it is.
so much money
That's it.
that
Yeah, yeah.
it's
It is so much money, so much flame, so much a reflected glory and the balance has shifted completely, Sharda. When I was young, uh, players had too little power. Now the superstars had too little power. Now maybe they have too much, and it. I mean, So Ganguly has been a particular disappointment, but uh, it's not as if letting N. Srinivasan run it overtly
that is
instead
the
of covertly.
argument.
Instead of
That is
overtly.
the argument you get told that listen,
Yeah.
it was better before. No, it was not better
It's
before.
not getting him to run it overtly rather than covertly. It's going to be better for cricket all round. No, not at all.
The other lovely thing about the book, let's move away from the unlovely things. Is all these little characters that are there in it, that are not famous, but they're just. So I was just do tell the Chandu Gadkari story because of which actually marks the difference between I won't maybe not because you have to read it to understand it. That marks the difference between the club player, the amateur player, and the slightly high quality player. There's another fantastic story that you'll hear this from where everyone has their own version of this story. And there's a story that I don't know if I've told you this. Murli was doing an ad somewhere around Bangalore, Delhi, wherever. I don't know, Madhu, whether you heard the story at Cricinfo. One of my Cricinfo colleagues is here. Murli was doing an ad and they said, Murli, why don't you bowl to us? The TV and the production guys said that on. He said, no, it's all right. He said, no, please, little bit. He said, okay, wear a helmet. So they were saying, why? She said, just I'm telling you, wear a helmet. So it said, okay. So they got a helmet. They came. And the guy who thought he could bat against Murli, he said that by the time Murli released the ball and he could respond, his helmet had been knocked off. And Murli told him that I'm bowling at 50% of the pace that I can actually bowl. So literally that was the gap between what at the level at which the cricket is being played, even by a spinner, and between people that were looking at it. And this is a story told to me by someone. I remembered it when I read your Chandu Gadkari story of him coming, I think in 1970s or something like that, when he turned up at...
Chandu Gadkari was a test player who played 6 test matches for India. And I watched him back in 1970 when he was already 40 in the Indian Military Academy. He was an army officer. He was playing against the cadets. And there's a story of him getting 90 not out. And what that told me, as a 12-year-old who's watched club cricketers in Bangalore and the odd Ranji Trophy player, the difference between even a Ranji Trophy player and a test player.
And the Mushtaq Ali at the age of 70 also.
Mushtaq. So that's true. Yeah.
Mad. Just
And that comes from having, if you play cricket at a decent level, but never really succeed. It doesn't lead to bitterness or cynicism. I mean, failure in other spheres of life may lead to bitterness and cynicism of those who succeed in that sphere. But in cricket, it leads to appreciation and enjoyment and wonder. I've tried to bowl an outswinger from the edge of the crease and failed. Now, when I saw Kapil do it, I said, "Kya baat hai? Kya baat hai?" And you can just you can write 3 paragraphs about it, right? So I think it comes from also playing the game. I think some musicians have it. I mean, we talk to classical musicians of a competent level and hear them talk about how Ravi Shankar did it or how Amir Khan did it. This is a wonderful book. I mean, how many music lovers are there in this room? Hindustani classical music. Okay. Have you heard of a book called The Lost World of Hindustani Music? Yes. So those of you who not get it, it's a fabulous account by amateur musician of great musicians. And that's the kind of thing, it's like...
One of my other favorite stories in this is about K. Lakshman, which is again just a fantastic story about cricket. When you hear it, you just say, this is the kind of thing that has to be written.
K. Lakshman was the 11th and least well-known member of the Karnataka team that won the Ranji Trophy in 1974. Shanti must have been too young in 1974 to remember K. Lakshman. Right? You don't? Okay. He was a left-arm spinner. He was 40. He was from ITI. So he played for the same club as the great Erapalli Prasanna. And Karnataka had Vishwanath and Patel to get the runs, and they had only two bowlers, Prasanna and Chandrasekhar. And they needed a rest. You know, you can't, even spinners can't bowl 20 overs at a trot. So when Prasanna needed a rest, he got K. Lakshman to bowl 3 maiden overs because he's a fantastic maiden over bowler, right? He would have been a great IPL bowler. And his first and last Ranji season, we won the tournament. And he was bald. He was 40, he was bald. He batted no helmet, without a cap. And we called him Tata, because he was an oldest man. But we loved him because without his bowling, without his allowing Chandra and Prasanna to rest their tired fingers, we would never have won the Ranji Trophy. And that was my childhood memory. And then I went back and checked the scores. And you look at his bowling analysis. I mean, it's like 20 overs, 12 maidens, 8 runs, right? And so it was like, I don't know what happened to him. I mean, I hope he's still alive. I mean, and Prasanna will certainly remember him very fondly, because he is with the guy, one of the guys who won us the Ranji Trophy, because he gave our main bowlers a rest. I remember he would wipe his bald pate in the sand, and we would say, Tata, Tata. Lovely it was. It was lovely, yeah.
See, no index, I can't find it fast enough. Can't find the scores fast enough. Ram, we have been talking for an hour. We could go on for another, but I think maybe we should set up some questions.
Your phone, the SMS, there are questions from the audience.
Okay.
And then you have questions from Zoom on your phone, Sharda.
Zoom. From you?
From me.
Yeah.
WhatsApp.
Okay.
And now we have a series of SMSs. If you can read them out.
Yeah. Yeah, let him just. Yeah, anyway, you all got questions in here?
Just quickly.
Yeah. You
okay.
first.
From Brian, Brian says, in your book you refer to the Ranji teams and state that M.L. Jaisima was the best cricketing brain in the country. Curious to know on what basis? Well, two things. One is two factual observations, apart from folklore that I heard from my uncle and others. One was that when Pataudi moved from Delhi to Hyderabad, he played under Jaisima. So he was captain of India, but not captain of Hyderabad. Then Pataudi was removed as captain of the Indian team. Vadekar was appointed instead. And Jaisima was chosen for the West Indies team, but he wasn't good enough to make the playing 11. So periodically, Vadekar would send some batsman out and ask Jaisima to come into field to tell him, give him advice on how to change the bowling. Right. So there is actually some concrete factual evidence as well, apart from folklore. Murli, as is believed in Tamil Nadu, was Kirwani suspect while keeping Venkat. Only someone from Tamil Nadu would believe this. Okay. Sorry. All right. It's true that there was a tour of the West Indies in 1976 when we won one test and lost two. And on that tour, there were a couple of stumpings that Kirmani missed of Venkat. I can't remember exactly whom. It may have been Clive Lloyd. No, so much in 1976. So it's clearly a mythical story from Tamil Nadu. The fact that you said it's clearly a mythical story. It was only Clive Lloyd and maybe Richards. Richards was one. And that's possible. And that's how the story spread. However, what if Kirmani had not been chosen and Bharat Reddy had been chosen? How would he have kept to Chandrasekhar? Would he have, all gone for 4 byes? Every ball would have gone for 4 byes. I mean, I'm just joking. Bharat Reddy was also very
That's
good.
called sledging.
That's called sledging. But it's a lovely question, despite my polemical answer, because it shows how deep the loyalties ran, state loyalties ran. I mean, how did St. Stephen shape Indian cricket? Hardly. It had 4 test cricketers, none of them great. I mean, St. Xavier's College, Bombay probably shaped Indian cricket much more.
Or Tarak Sinha Sonnet Club.
Or Tarak Sinha Solid Club, which I talk about, which produced 18 test cricketers. Question from Vidya. What are your thoughts on fans who have a lifelong love affair with the game becoming cricket commentators versus ex-cricket players playing this role? Would this improve the quality? Now, it's an interesting question because Harsha is a lifelong fan and he's certainly our best commentator today, right? But on the other hand, if you look outside of India, the best commentators are ex-players. I mean, it's Atherton and Holding and won and people like that. I'm sure that if Dravid took to commentary, he'd be good. Uh, Ganguly was not bad actually in the odd stint he did. So it's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing to say. I wish there was more radio commentary, and that could be left to the, I know that in this Australia series, one of my mutual friends, Pradeep Magazine, said he's watching the television and has radio commentary on because often that has more charm. Yeah.
Possibly ABC.
ABC Sport.
So
Yeah.
it's the
ABC
select,
Grandstand or something. He said.
the select dugout, which Amit Verma has told you about, is the kind of commentary to follow at some point, but
Yeah.
it's not available everywhere. It's almost like they infantilize the audience. Is that all the questions?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay, the questions here. S.R. Ravichandran wants you to say something about Ramesh Saxena.
Oh, Ramesh Saxena. Ramesh Saxena was a legend of my uncle's youth. My uncle played the inter-college tournament against him. He was a wonderful, attractive batsman. He played one test match for India, but he was sent to open on a wet wicket in England in the early part of the summer, and he failed. He normally batted number 4, and that was it. I sadly never watched him bat, but I once played against him. I don't know, do I mention it in the book? I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but we played a match against Rusi Modi's 11. Rusi Modi was the chairman of TISCO, and he had a team composed of the Bihar Ranji Trophy team, and they came to play against us. This would have been 1973, 74 probably. And Ramesh Saxena did not bat in that match, but I remember how beautifully he was dressed. I remember his flannels, his button to the wrist. And I was like, in my first year in college, I was umpired. I didn't play, but I remember watching him. I said, "Yeah, aadmi cricketer hai," and there's a tragedy to his story because he played just one test match where he was made to open against England fast bowlers, and he never played for India again. Yeah, I'm glad someone remembers him. Yeah.
Sachdev Ramakrishna says, Mr. Guha, it's always a pleasure to hear you. Which books on cricket have deeply influenced you? And he gives CLR James's example. Maybe there are others.
Yeah, so many cricket books. In my anthology, The Picket of Boko Cricket, which, what did you say? Ramakrishna.
Yes, Sachdev Ramakrishna.
So where Sachdev should try and get. I end with an appendix called, I forget, An Addict's Archive, where I list 50 books I've loved about cricket. And there's a Bangalore book collector called Firoz, whom some of you might know, who's actually found all 50. He's gone down and found all 50. But that's 20 years ago, so there are now probably 50 more. And among the many wonderful cricket books published in the last 20 years, let me mention 2 by Indians, Rahul Bhattacharya's Pandey from Pakistan, and Prashant Kidambi's Cricket Country, wonderful social history of the 1911 tour of England. Let me mention 1 by an Englishman, Shildsbury's the cricket. No, the more recent one. It's called The Spirit of Cricket. It's called The Spirit of Cricket. And Cricketwala, and any book by Gideon Haigh. His biography of Vaughan, his biography of Trumper, his biography of Iverson, his account of the Packer era, all came out after the Picket of Boko Cricket. So yeah, lots of great books. Yeah.
Anand Lakshman has an interesting question. How has caste changed over time in cricket? How was it in each era? Has that really been understood or explored?
It should be studied much more deeply. I mean, I wrote about the first family of Dalit cricketers, the Palwankar brothers in Cornwall Foreign Field. And I posed the question that the first great family of Indian cricketers were Dalits, but they haven't been representation. Part of this may be caste bias, maybe class, lack of access to facilities, to coaches. Part of it may also be that talented Dalits, following the example of B.R. Ambedkar, would want to become lawyers, scholars, educators, and not cricketers. I mean, that's also possible. But it is true and regrettably true, that Indian cricket teams are massively upper caste dominated.
And when we had a conference in Delhi, I remember someone had asked that question, and everyone got some people got really offended at the fact that it had been brought up. There was some gentleman from the army who said, no, cricket is a meritocracy, and it's like they do not even want to discuss the topic. They literally
there are lots of biases, not just caste-based. I mean, including class-based, including partiality in selection, including all of that is certainly part of how cricket is run. Yeah.
And K.S. Narahari says, do you agree with the kind of money that young cricketers get in the IPL when some of them have not even played in Ranji Trophy? Should the IPL be the basis for selecting 2020 teams?
No, that's
for
up to
India?
the board. But what is unconscionable is that Ranji Trophy players are not paid their dues for months and sometimes years on end,
Which is happening right now.
which is happening right now. So I think that, so let the IPL players be paid well by all means, but why should Ranji Trophy players be denied their legitimate dues, which is what is happening right now? Yeah.
Amanda Lakshman says, is the shift from Test cricket to IPL like a shift from monarchy to democracy?
No. It's a valorization of pop music over classical music, or maybe not even pop music, or clamor and noise over classical music. All right. Sorry. No. I mean, it's like.
I think what she's referring to is the democratization
No.
of cricket.
I'll answer that clearly. No, the IPL is anti-democratic. It's biased towards rich people in the affluent parts of India. UP, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Orissa, and the Northeast do not have a single team between them. Why? Because there's the poorer parts of India and the advertisers don't want to go there. So there was a time where Pune and Bombay, two cities in the same state, had IPL teams. So please, Amanda, consider the sociological impacts of the consequences of the IPL. Secondly, the fact that when the Indian team plays, all of us watch it. Whereas if an IPL team plays, only people, it's really based around that city, which has to be, it has to be.
Unless it's Mumbai Indians or Chennai Super Kings, they have fans everywhere.
They have fans. Okay. But, this fact that why aren't there teams all across? Or why doesn't, when I was on the board, I said, why can't, you must give new franchises to UP, Bihar, etc. But even if you can't, why doesn't the KKR play 2 matches a year in Guwahati? What's the big deal? Why can't Bombay play 2 matches a year in Amravati, right? So that you take the game everywhere.
No, and the one of the things that came out with this Lodha committee recommendations was, one state, one team. There was this massive outrage and backlash against statists. What is this? Who knows cricket in Nagaland? But that's not the fault of the Naga people. You have to put a ground there and send your teams there, and then make them do your due diligence in that sense. Before I start ranting, Jayaraman N offers a variance on the IPL. Hasn't it produced some awesome, confident Indian cricket talent? And a similar question from Ravichandran.
Well,
I think confidence in the sense of not being overawed by pressure because you're playing at
that precedes the IPL. See, IPL is often given credit for things that happened well before the IPL. That's a good and important observation. Indian cricketers are more self-confident, less deferential, more daring, more innovative than they were in the 70s and 80s. But that totally precedes IPL. And let me tell you 2 stories. One, the time it happened, was shown to happen, was in that final in Lords where Yuvraj and Kef took us from 80 for 5 to 300 odd, right?
320.
What year was that?
2002.
2002. 6 years before the IPL, right? That was the moment where these 2 lads who did not know what Lords were, in an earlier book, I tell the story about how when we toured England in 1967, Prasanna, Chandrasekhar and V. Subramanya, 3 Bangalore cricketers were chosen for the team. And an old Bombay cricketer who had toured England in 1932 got them out to tell them what it is like to tour England. And he put, on a grassy track, he made them bat. And then he said, if an English umpire says not out, it's always not out. If he says out, just walk, and always wear your tie like this. Always make sure that you're... Now, but Kef and Yuvraj played that knock. And Ganguly took off his shirt, right? Okay. That was because they had already become self-confident well before. I'll tell you another story, which is one of my favorite stories, which is not told here, which is about when we played in Pakistan in 2004, before the IPL. Yeah. Sehwag and Dravid opened in 1 test match. I think was it Multan? When they were 390 for no loss at the end of the Multan. There was some 370 for no loss at the end of the first day. The world record for the first innings was then 413, Mankad and Roy. And a TV journalist came home. I remember this vividly because I'd broken my leg. The interview was done with me lying down. Because Sehwag had said, what had happened was at the end of the day's play, the reporter had gone to Sehwag and Dravid and said, 370 for no loss. Tomorrow you'll come, 40 runs to break the Mankad and Roy record. What are your feelings about this? And Dravid said, it's something to think. Mankad was a very great cricketer. There's a burden of history weighing on my head. And they asked Dravid, Sehwag, what do you think? Sehwag said, yeah, Mankad, Fankad, Kaun. Right. Now, and the
I'm not
journalist...
sure the exact quote is, but it is sort of...
It's
yeah.
it's
like
a ballpark. It's a ballpark. And the
a
journalist
good
was
story.
right. It's a good. I said, look, that's how I Sehwag plays that way. It's because Mankad, Fankad, yeah, maro, maro. And there's one more story about Sehwag, which is probably true. Again, it was told to me by...
No, the Sehwag story is true that he had no idea about this historic
Not only
significance.
that. In the same tour, 2004.
4.
No, when Yuvraj and Kef did that. 2002.
Two.
Okay. The test matches were before the one-day matches.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so Sehwag had played the test matches. A one-day series was followed. And Kef and Yuvraj were not in the test team. And they came and asked him, they said, England mein kaise khelenge? He said, idhar aaya to idhar aise maro, udhar aaya to udhar maro. That was it. So, I think this self-confidence of the Indian player probably comes with Kapil Dev.
And the fact that they came from non-metro areas, the whole thing started around the mid-90s.
So it's well before IPL. So the IPL is often given credit for things that occurred well before the IPL.
So, Mr. Jayaraman, this is your answer. Sachin Mulay wants to know something about Hari Girwani's on drive, which is imprinted in your memory.
Well, Hari was a beautiful player. It was not just his on drive, the late cut, the hook. He was a wonderful stroke player. And again, like Ramesh Saxena. Ramesh Saxena played one test match. Hari tragically did not even play one test match. But there's sometimes these artists whom you remember just for the range of their stroke play. And, the on drive I remember particularly because the late afternoon and Radeshwar Vatsu, the fearsome fast bowler, was bowling. But also his late cut, his leg glide, he was a beautiful player. Yeah.
Sachin Mulay also, no, sorry, this is Alok Prasanna Kumar has a question. Your thoughts on the third generation of Karnataka players, the current set? I think it's more generations than that, but the current set of players.
It's nice. I think one of the agonizing aspects of this book was compiling an all-time Karnataka 11. And the most agonizing decision was, let me just pick out the page. Okay. Please let me read my all-time Karnataka 11, which I'll find in a minute. 1 second. Yeah. Here we are. Okay. So, it has Vishwanath at 3. I'm deliberately leaving the openers out for the minute. Vishwanath at 3, Rahul Dravid at 4, Brijesh Patel at 5, Bini at 6, Kirmani at 7, Kumble at 8, Srinath at 9, Prasanna at 10, and Chandrasekhar at 11. So the openers were the most difficult. My openers at the moment are Kundaran and Mayank Agarwal. Okay, but I have to leave out KL Rahul. Now, and I could not leave out Kundaran, because this is, he was a fabulous player and an incredible attacking player at a time when you didn't have those kind of openers in Indian cricket, well before Sehwag, and so it had to be either Mayank Agarwal or
Mayank Agarwal will be doing cartwheels. Mayank Agarwal will be doing cartwheels.
He won't be needing this course, probably. He has better things to do. Yeah. But so, and also, I pointed out something else in the book, that Karun Nair did something Dravid and Vishwanath never could, which is score a triple century in a test match. So, I like Shreyas Gopal. He's a nice all-rounder. Why don't they take him? We need a sixth. We need a batsman who can bowl. Why don't they fly? As the match yesterday showed. Just if I was a selector, I would fly him out. And it's only incidental that he's from Karnataka, right?
And so quarantine. You're not stuck with quarantine.
Right. So, I like them. I watch them. I used to really like Vinay Kumar's spirit, as a leader and as a bowler. Yeah.
This is Colonel Shekhar. You chose to quit BCCI over staying in and fighting the system. Comments. I mean, you have to actually read the entire chapter. In detail
Please
to
read those two
understand.
chapters. I tried, I failed, and I left. Yeah.
And there's another question that I've got from Aarti, who's here. He says, do you watch women's cricket? And is there a book on women's cricket we can expect? That's it.
No, sadly, I don't. And I have become, and that's a deficiency. There's a wonderful history of women's cricket that was written by Patnaik and
Karunya Keshav,
Karnataka. Yeah.
the fire burns.
Yeah.
Blue.
And sadly, I don't. And sadly, also, I've become a one-sport person. When I was younger, I mean, Sharda watches and writes about many sports. And I said, my son Keshava would rather watch basketball or football than IPL. I've become a one-sport person. It's cricket and men's cricket and now only test cricket. When I was younger, I would watch Davis Cup, I would watch football, but something has happened. Yeah.
What is it? Just it's too tiring to just be soaking in so much of.
Yeah, I think also. Yeah, but I mean, for me, test cricket is still supreme. I mean, I'm looking forward to the Australian fast bowlers. Okay,
Any predictions?
No, I think particularly with Kohli missing 3 matches, it'll be tough. Even with him there, it would have been tough, as we saw yesterday. Yeah.
So we are almost done with this, with our question and answers, and the audience that's been watching. Thank you very much for watching in these strange times. And I'm so glad that BIC could have this session. And it's wonderful and fitting that cricket has brought us all of us here for this event. And we've heard stories about the wonderful folklore there is in cricket, the ugly truths that are there in cricket, and we have to thank Ram for remembering them and writing them and telling us these stories. Thank you very much, Ram. If there's anything else you would like to say to everyone who's particularly online and watching on Zoom or.
No, I think there's a vast array of cricket literature around. And I said, an earlier book of mine recommends 50 books published till the year 2000. But please read some of those. Read Gideon Haig, read Rahul Bhattacharya, read Prashant Kidambi, and watch out for the time when we have Richard Cashman's book out again with an introduction by Sharda.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot. It's been a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.